Hey friends, happy full moon in Scorpio. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm super excited to share this episode with you because I really couldn't imagine something more suitable to share with you on the Scorpio full moon. So I talked with Jennifer Patterson, who I've been following for a while. I had a session with her myself. Feel really deeply inspired with how she's showing up and what she's sharing and how she's prioritizing marginalized communities and working with sliding scales and how she's talking about plant magic. So yeah, she is amazing. Please do check her out. Here's what we talked about. We talked about supporting survivors with breathwork, body-based writing workshops, and herbalism. We talked a lot about working through grief and trauma, as well as the creative process behind the anthology Creating Sexual Violence, which I found super interesting. We talked about the power of being truly witnessed, psychedelic experiences, and working with poison medicine. So yeah, enjoy the episode. Let me know what you think. I would love to hear from you, and if you like it, please share it with someone who you think could benefit from it too. I want to recap really quickly something I've already mentioned in the last episode, but it feels pretty exciting, so I want to talk about it again really briefly. As you might know, I have a Patreon for this podcast that's supporting my work, as well as the podcast and the free webinars that I'm running. And it's been really beautiful. So people can pledge $3 or more, and they receive a monthly ritual kit, which is like a framework for you to be your own witch and have some inspiration to make some magic in your life. And as part of that, I also am offering a new course called Do It Yourself Business Magic, and I created it because I've taken a lot of really expensive business training out of insecurity, and because I thought I needed a permission slip for what I wanted to do. So I learned all these tools around software systems and product management and decision making and social media. I wanted to pass that on in a way that's really fun and accessible and that meets you where you are, and that it's not going to promise you to make 6 figures in 3 months or to get a super polished Instagram feed with like 10,000 followers overnight, but it is a really beautiful framework for you to explore what values are underpinning the business or the creative work that you want to do in the world, how you can make that sustainable for yourself, and how you can take care of yourself in the process and really nurture your creativity. So the 6 modules are the following. The first one is called Purpose, Sustainability, and Cash. The second one is Self-Care for Small Business Owners. The third one is Building Solid Structures with Software Systems that Work for You. The fourth one is Social Media Audience and Do-It-Yourself Media. The fifth one is Creating Sustainable Offerings. And the sixth one is Growth and Visions. So yeah, it's for creative people who want to do things differently, and I'm hoping that it offers you the best of both worlds, because you can, sign up anytime you feel ready. You can go at your own pace, but if you want to connect, you can come and show up for the free monthly webinars to ask questions and meet other like-minded people. So you can either buy this for a one-off payment of $149, or you can pledge $11 or more on my Patreon and then get access to this course and my WordPress web design and branding courses as well. And that is my version of offering a sliding scale. You can remain a Patreon for as long as you want to, or as long as you can afford, or for as long as you feel that you're benefiting from my work. So you can find more information and become a Patreon at patreon.com/SarahMcDanielLove. And now on today's show. Thank you so much. Really beautiful guest on the show today. I know I always say that, but this is really cool. And yeah, just sitting with a lot of gratitude at the moment to all the amazing people that say yes to coming on the show and making time. And so, yay, today, Jennifer Patterson said yes and made some time. I have worked with her personally in the capacity of having a herbal consultation about a year ago. And I had at the time been following her on Instagram for a couple of months, and I really loved what she shared because she has just such a deeply resonating, oh God, I feel myself not finding the right words, because even deeply resonating is like not good enough or like feels a bit too overused. What I'm trying to say is I just really loved how she shared about working with plants, about trauma, about shadow aspects of the human experience and really difficult emotions. And I had at the time not been working with grief very much. And I noticed recently that Jennifer calls herself a grief worker now, which I was like, yeah, that really makes sense to me. Like, this person really has a deep understanding of that part of the human experience. So yeah, I had a herbal consultation with her, which was really great. And I've been really fascinated with the potions that she's been making. And she has also trained in breathwork, which is a modality that, you know, I love and also trained in. And I'm really excited to talk more about. And then also she has edited a book called Queering Sexual Violence, which mainly made me cry in ways that I really needed to cry. It kind of randomly, in air quotes, fell into my hands one day when I really needed it. And it's full of stories that are really diverse and really rich and very raw. And yeah, I mean, it's a really intense book to read, I think, but there's so much in feeling your own stories reflected. And I really noticed myself rethinking a lot of ways that I had been thinking about trauma and experience. So I can super highly recommend it. And I'm really excited to speak to Jennifer today. And I will now finally, after much fangirling, hand it over and say, hey, welcome. Thank you so much. Tell us who you are.
Hi, thank you. I'm really excited to be here. I've also been following you, you know, for like a year, and I just really appreciate how you bring so much magic to your work. And I think you just also like you give people on Instagram and in other spaces on your website like just so much opportunity to tap into free resources and low cost resources. And I think like that just makes such a huge difference for people that are trying to build small businesses and have like a magic practice. And so I'm just really grateful to be here. Thank you.
Yay. Do you want to tell us where you are in the world and what nature is like around you?
Ooh, nature. I'm in Brooklyn, New York. I've been here for almost 14 years. And there are lots of magnolia trees blooming, which is beautiful. But yeah, it's been a slow spring, and most of us here are just kind of over the cold, over the snow that's coming. And I know I'm personally looking forward to kind of just being in the woods more and taking some trips out of Brooklyn and just like being with plants a little bit more than I have been.
Yeah. Can I ask in a little bit more detail? I'm so sorry if that's boring to any reader.
No.
I was in I was in the States for the first time ever last year in September, and I stayed in Brooklyn as well. I really liked it. And when you've never been somewhere, everything is like big and overwhelming. And I'm just like, I wondered hanging out in Brooklyn, like how far away is the nearest big woodland? Like, what do you have to do? Can you get there on public transport? Are you okay? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, there's Prospect Park, which is like a big park, and I don't know. I mean, I go there a lot. I'll like have picnics there, hang out with friends or whatever, but it doesn't feel like being in the woods to me. It's some of it's wooded, but it's not like the woods. I have family in Pennsylvania, so like that's about 2 hours away, and I'll go there to the woods. Or my favorites like New Hampshire and Vermont, which is, you know, like 4 or 5 hours away. And there's some, you know, like there's some wooded areas in Queens, and, you know, there's other parks too. But yeah, it's a different kind of relationship with nature, I think, here in the city for sure.
But it's so energizing as well. I really loved being there, and I didn't mean to say it's boring because it's too far from the woods. I really thought it was super exciting to be there, and there was like just a special kind of buzz, and I really liked sitting by the water and like looking over and seeing the lights. And I think the encounters I had with plants in New York were more intense. It was almost like, oh my God, there's a kindred soul, and like all this wildness, like let's hang on to each other really tight.
Totally. I have this thing too that happens a lot. I mean, like I think many of us that work with plants will like be moving through the world and not see some of the plants. And I think like last summer I was getting really into mimosa. I was working with mimosa a lot, and I was like, where is mimosa? Like I was just trying to find mimosa all the time. And then I realized it was like on these like paths to like different places that I would go a lot, and I had not ever seen mimosa. So I feel like they like, I don't know, there's a way where like plants are kind of hiding in plain sight here often, and then whenever you're able to like come across them, it's kind of like an exciting experience, at least for me.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. I also really love the book Herbal Rituals by Judith Berger. And
Yeah.
a lot of her stories are written in Brooklyn, and it makes total sense to me. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, it's a great book.
I would love to talk a little bit more about your backstory. So maybe you can tell us what your current main practices are and how you came to them.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I work with herbs as an herbalist, and I've been doing that for I think about 7 years. And I came to working with herbs through not having health insurance and having health problems. So like I felt pretty overwhelmed by trying to find doctors in the city and getting support around the health stuff I had going on. So I kind of started just playing with plants and like working with tinctures, and that felt really amazing to me because I felt like I was able to have a little bit of control around what was going on for me. And then I realized I also wanted to, like I got very overwhelmed in the beginning because I feel like herbalism just feels like this lifelong, I mean, most of the work I do, I guess, is like a lifelong study. And so I was like, how will I ever learn everything? Like, I'll never be a master herbalist, which I don't want to be a master anything. So that feels okay to me. But like, but it was a stressful process in the beginning, and then it's become more playful where I feel like really alive working with plants, and I love working with other people with plants too. And then I do writing workshops. So I do like trauma focused and like body-based writing workshops where we're really just kind of in groups together. I do them mostly in person, but I do a couple online every year, where we're just like together reading other writers. We'll do like some writing prompts together, and then if people are comfortable with sharing their work, they'll share their work. And I've had a chance to do them kind of all over, but I'm currently doing one at New York Harm Reduction Educators, which is a needle exchange and like a harm reduction clinic up in Harlem. And I've been doing them there for like 3 years now. And that's just an amazing space to be in because, like most of the workshops I guess I do it's always a mix of like writers and non-writers. And it's just fun to be like writing with people who, like again, are kind of bringing some ease to their work, like it's not so serious. Like I always tell people that the writing we're doing together doesn't have to look any certain way, and like there's no rules, like we can write however we want to write. And so those are fun to do with people, and hard too because we're writing about trauma very often, or just like really being in people's experiences. And then breath work, which I found personally I guess a little over 3 years ago. And the first time I did it, I was like, I have to do this with people. So, like I went a lot on my own, and I've been practicing on my own. And then I also had the chance to train with Erin Telford last February of 2017. And so since then I've been doing, a lot of work with people, one-on-one and doing group work. And then I do some virtual work, and breathwork's been like this surprising and kind of incredible practice to come across.
Yeah.
And also, sorry, go ahead.
Surprising and amazing is also how I would describe it. Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, well, you had the experience too of you came and did the training at Maha Rose, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I really loved it. It was beautiful.
Cool.
I didn't want to cut you off there. Was there anything more that you wanted to say about your practices?
Oh, just that I'm a queer person, and I'm a survivor of multiple forms of violence. So like my work is open to everybody. I have also kind of like, there's like a focus and a lens where I'm often in community with other queer and trans people doing this work, which feels, really, I love being in spaces with other queer and trans people, especially when so often like accessing healing as a queer person or a trans person or like a person of color, even like so many people that are really in the margins and the intersections of identity. It's like, it's nice to be able to be in spaces together and like doing this kind of deep and hard work.
Yes, totally. Yeah. And I love seeing how you are really graceful and beautifully working with, offering really accessible work and honoring your time and energy at the same time. I think that is such an ongoing challenge, isn't it, working with marginalized communities, which I'm also really wanting to center more. And I love that we have all this technology now, which enables us to share so much more freely and just makes sharing radical ideas and being accessible with that easier. So yeah, I'm really happy to know you and to see how things are unfolding for you. And yeah, it's just very exciting to see. Yay!
Thank you.
Yeah, so coming back to what you already touched on, you're working a lot with grief and trauma. I love what you're writing about your work on your About page, and it just feels really, really grounded and integrated. And you also edited this really beautiful anthology. I never can pronounce that word. That I talked about in the beginning. And I would love to hear kind of maybe what's given you courage in that, and how have plants supported you on that journey?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when I feel like there's so many things in my life personally that feel like very interwoven and we're kind of happening alongside each other. So a bunch of years ago, I started doing anti-violence work. Like I experienced sexual assault in my teens and physical assault in my 20s and childhood trauma. And like I was like, I need to do something with this, not just for me, but like I need to kind of like just be in a world with other people that are kind of moving through this stuff. And so I trained as a rape crisis counselor, and so I was on call in an emergency room for a while with survivors, and then I did some community organizing, and I felt a lot of frustration in that space in particular because I felt like the narratives around who we were serving and like the stories of who were survivors were really just felt very limited to me, like they are in so many spaces, kind of like focused on a cisgender white straight woman, and like there's a real lack of understanding. I mean, maybe more not as much now, but like that all genders can experience and also like enact violence on other people. And so that kind of brought me, being frustrated in that space is what actually brought me to working on the anthology, because I was like, I need to be working in a way that feels more aligned with me personally and politically. And so I started working on the book, which, like when I started working on it, I had really no clue what I was doing. Like I had been writing since I was a child, but I wasn't, I had like no experience with publishing or pitching a book anywhere or, editing. And I learned a lot along the way. And I also learned a lot through other people. Like a lot of people were really generous with their wisdom and their time. And so it ended up being it was a 6-year process of editing and publishing the book. And so like alongside that, like I've been moving in and out of like pretty major mental health stuff for most of my life. And so herbs were an opportunity for me to kind of like meet some of my own needs around what I was experiencing around depression and anxiety. And, like it was funny because like for the first couple of years of working on the book, I was kind of like, I am doing great. This is fine. Like I'm reading about violence every single day, but I feel fine. And I think like I hit a point where, I don't know, maybe it was cumulative or something, but like it started feeling heavier. And plants were really supportive to me. I think, like being like alongside doing that work, like also like collecting plants and making tinctures and, like having like a touchstone of something that I could use to kind of support myself was really important. And yeah, I mean, I feel like herbs are really big, and I guess the book came out about 2 years ago now. So I'm trying to place, it was actually, I found breathwork towards the end of working on the anthology, I think like within the last year, maybe. Yeah, I feel like there was a lot happening while I was working on the book, and like a lot of my work still is supporting people who are moving through and with past trauma and current trauma, and so that's ongoing, and I think there's a way where I don't know, there's something about like it doesn't feel heavy to me anymore for the most part. I think it feels there was a shift, I feel like, for myself a couple of years ago where I realized like I didn't just want to be speaking about sexual violence or being I'm a writer first and foremost. So I think speaking for me is always a little tricky, but I was like, no, what I want to be doing is I want to be in the depths of it with people. Like I want to be, having gone through, a lot of really heavy, dark times that I still go through. There's something really incredible about being with somebody else in that time. And so, yeah, like the idea of kind of like being a grief worker started to come through, of just really it's kind of a way to just sum up all the work that I do, because I think that, while grief is hard and terrible and exhausting, it's also beautiful and liberatory to kind of be looking at the hard stuff. And, it's obviously easier to do that when you're being supported by somebody else or many other people too.
Yeah. Yes, totally. Thank you so much for sharing that. You already said that you kind of came across breathwork towards the end of that process, and I would love to hear a little bit more about what that practice means to you now and how it has helped you in addition to plans.
Yeah, I mean, I had met Erin a bunch of years ago when I went to an acupuncture session with her. And so we kind of were in each other's, social media orbits. And when I saw she was doing breath work, I really didn't know anything about it. But I had this dog who was my dream friend of my life. I had him for 10.5 years, and he had passed from an unexpected month-long cancer situation. And so it was just the bottom had dropped out for me. I often had this theory of mine where I was when Frank dies, I'm not going to be able to be here anymore. I felt like he was kind of like tethering me to this world in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so when he died, I just kind of was free falling a little bit. And so a few months later, I was I was in a deep depression. And so I was I need to get some sort of support. And so I went to breath work, and it was really the first kind of moment I had in those months where I was oh, maybe I'm going to be okay. I might be okay. And so that's kind of an ongoing thing that I get from breath work, is just this idea of even in our worst times, where the grief is huge or the pain is huge, breath work it's this radical practice of being in wherever we are. So you can't, and I think for many of us also who have experienced trauma or just live in the world, which is violent to so many of us, being in our bodies, quote unquote, is a very disorienting and difficult experience. And so breath work is you can't not be in your body during it, you're radically in your body for all of the good and the bad. Yeah. And I think being able to line up kind of just multiple emotional experiences happening at once has been really useful to me. And I think it's really useful to people that do breath work too. And also I think again, related to that is just this kind of radical witness too. So it's when you're doing a breathwork session or a workshop, you're able to radically witness what's going on in your body. And I think that's often so much of the process of healing something, is being able to sit with it and look right at it and be oh, this is what you are, I understand you a little bit more now. And then again, I, as a facilitator, I get the extreme privilege of witnessing other people. And I think that like double witnessing that happens where we're witnessing ourselves and someone else is witnessing us witness ourselves, if that makes sense. Like, it's incredible. It's just like, it feels like big, huge work can happen fast. Like it's, you know, it's like a 2 hour or an hour and a half session, and it's like, it's fast, but it's powerful. And it's really one of the most, you know, like I've done a lot of things. I've been in and out of therapy since I was 7 years old. I don't know. There's like all these I was on antidepressants for 10 years, and like, that's another story of coming off of them. But like breathwork just feels like this really wild, and it's almost a little bit beyond language experience. So yeah, it's been cool to kind of like, it's something I'm still like learning about and learning with too. It's always kind of changing.
Yeah, it really is. And I loved how you described this almost holographic experience of like witnessing the persons witnessing you, witnessing you.
Yeah.
It's so true, because I think we, just doing breathwork, we meet each other in this really kind of authentic place. And it's magic. Yeah, it really feels magical. What I've witnessed both in myself and in the training with other people was just like so much openness, because there's no way to turn when you're lying there with your body breathing and you're being witnessed. And it's so brave to do that, and so beautiful. And yeah, I'm just so grateful for this modality
Totally. And there's so much wisdom that comes through in those states too. You know, like breathwork to me is an altered state. It's a non-ordinary state. And, you know, like the traditions the lineage that I was trained in come from like pranayamic breath traditions, and also holotropic breath traditions, where, you know, like Stan Groff in holotropic breathwork was literally working with LSD. And when it became illegal, he started working with this breath practice as like another way to reach this altered state. And so to me, you know, like breath work and psychedelics and even dissociation, it's like, these are all like powerful altered states that we can kind of access. And, you know, like if we have support in being in them, like we can actually get a lot of information and a lot of wisdom from these places too.
Yes, yeah. Oh my God, this conversation makes me so happy. Yeah, that's very true. And it's also a really beautiful bridge into my next question. So, I want to frame this with two things, and you can share really anything that you like. But one thing I want to say is that I'm really grateful that you're up for talking about drugs and psychedelics. We talked about this a little bit in the session that we had together last year, and I saw you write really beautifully about these things on Instagram and on your blog, and I find that just so supportive and helpful. I really only had my first psychedelic experience this year at New Year's, and fucking hell, it totally blew me away. I've had other experiences with drugs in my 20s. I've luckily never done drugs as a teenager, because I think I really wasn't ready then, and my parents are quite hippie. They were always like very open about their own experiences, and also didn't really say a strict no, which kind of meant that I wasn't that interested because it wasn't forbidden.
Totally.
So anyway, I made really beautiful experiences later in my 20s, and now on New Year's had this first psychedelic experience, and it really changed my life. And I don't know a better way of describing it, even though this way kind of feels so old and overused again, but it has really changed my perspective and my understanding of time, and also of trauma and my own power, and the way I can bend experiences and reshape them, and about the things that I can inhabit and embody. You know, like I was at the peak of it, convinced of being so many magical beings that were all plants, and at one point I was like a black 3-headed snake, and it was hilarious.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was really great. And I had a friend of mine who was kind of helping me, and I asked them to ask me questions, and they did. And then I wrote them really long essays, and it felt like I was just channeling from a completely different side, both inside of myself and far out in the universe. And yeah, so I think this duality really changed. And Anyway, all this rambling to say, clearly I'm still integrating this
Yeah,
because I
sounds
can't
amazing.
because it's so hard to put into words. But I am really grateful for this experience, and I think that people like you who talked about it very openly um, cleared the space to have that experience from the shame that is so often put in those places. And so
Mm.
this is all this to say, this first thing, really to summarize, thank you so much for talking about this.
Yeah.
And the second thing I wanted to say is that you touched on mental health medication and antidepressants earlier, and it's just really important to me on the podcast, since it's become a bit of a bigger platform, to really say that as much as I love talking about plants and alternative things, I so honor and value the options that we have today, and really kind of never would want to shame anyone for
Mm-hmm.
being on any kind of medication that is right for them. And I know you feel the same, and I just wanted to mention that again. So
Yeah.
yeah, do you want to talk more about what psychedelics mean to you, and maybe also poison medicine?
Sure, yeah. Thank you so much for sharing about your experience too. I think like, I mean, these are some of I love talking about psychedelics and like the wisdom that we can find in those spaces. So it's kind of cool to hear that you've been doing some work too. And about, yeah, antidepressants and medications, like I feel similar. I was, like I'm always saying like, it doesn't make any sense to take tools away from people. It makes sense to like bring more. So like, I'm all about like, everything and anything that like helps keep us alive and helps keep us like, in the world doing the work that we want to be doing with other people and ourselves. And yeah, my experience with psychedelics was like I think it was really, I didn't do anything when I was younger, largely because like my 20s and early 30s where I drank pretty heavily. And so I always told myself, I was like, I have addiction tendencies, and like, I'm not somebody that should be, I don't need any more, I don't need any more problems. I'm just going to like stick with the one thing that I know is working, and it's alcohol. So, and I think, but like what you were saying too about like not using anything when you were younger, like, I think that the way that I came to psychedelics was a completely different experience than probably a lot of people's first experiences with psychedelics and drugs. And I came to it, like very clear sighted and like kind of, whereas I was using alcohol to really like disconnect from myself and my experiences and the trauma I'd experienced, psychedelics became a tool to really like connect to myself and like really relearn what I already knew that I had just been like pushing out or pushing away. And like I've worked with a bunch, and it's a huge conversation. And, one of the things I want to say is that my ability to speak to psychedelics in like a public way is very much related to my whiteness, I think. And, like knock on wood, like I'm not as at risk for being criminalized for my use as, a lot of people of color are. And so, like that's like a huge thing that just like always needs to be in the picture when we're talking about psychedelics is like privilege and, like what makes me feel quote unquote a little bit safer to be talking about these things. But yeah, I worked with a ceremonial plant medicine called iboga 4 years ago in June, and iboga is it's the interior root of a plant that grows in Gabon in Africa, and maybe one other country in Africa too, but I think it's largely in Gabon. And so it's a plant medicine. It's an extremely long experience. It's like a 3 or 4 day experience, and so. In like typical, I might have been right about my like addiction tendencies because it's considered one of the most intense and powerful psychedelics in the world, and so that was my first experience. I was like, I'm just gonna go for the most intense experience, but I was really rewarded. Like I was rewarded for doing that work by this incredible plant and by this incredible tradition, and yeah, it really, like we were talking about experiencing with moving through trauma, like it really allowed me like I had these incredible and difficult experiences of like seeing myself as a child and like really witnessing how my body felt like as a child, and like how like the fear and the really like a sense of terror felt as a child. And that, you know, while it was incredibly difficult, like it also felt like this huge gift to kind of be like, oh, wow, no wonder I feel this way now, or no wonder like this has been my experience, because that's huge to know as like a 6 or a 7-year-old. And so I had like a lot of incredible experiences of really like connecting to myself, and also connecting to like the stories that are still living in my body too. And kind of alongside, you know, working with psychedelics, I went to this incredible grad school in the US called Goddard College. They have an undergraduate program too, but you're able to kind of, you create your own curriculum within the program that you're in. So for 3 years, I was just like making my own study plans and researching. And so I kind of also started researching a lot around poison medicine, which is, you know, like it's the plants that are considered poisonous, quote unquote. But like, if you dig a little deeper, there's like, you know, like cultures throughout the world have also been working with these plants as medicine. So plants like datura and belladonna, and, you know, iboga as well, because iboga, actually, I should say, like it comes with a fair amount of like health precautions and risks, and so it's not something that like I'm talking about it a bit freely, but it's like it's an incredibly serious plant. So it's only to be done with experienced facilitators and people who like really have like a deep understanding of also the cultural and spiritual and religious traditions that it comes from. But yeah, poison medicine being this, you know, this idea of like, it's like, what is poison can also be medicine. And so, you know, it's complicated, but like in one respect, you know, what I was talking about before, it's kind of like coming to something with a certain amount of intention and integrity, and like knowing that it's, you know, like it's a tool to connect to yourself, feels very different than like coming to something from like a party perspective where I'm just like trying to get fucked up or something. So yeah, I mean, poison medicine's it's something that I'm still kind of in the process of understanding and working with too. And I'm trying to also like write more about it. So hopefully I'll have more things to say about it soon.
Yeah, and you have really beautiful tinctures and essences as well. So I'm really excited about your new label design that you mentioned, and generally everything that's coming. Yay!
Yeah.
You're also, when you're talking about your work, you're offering sliding scales, and you're thinking a lot about the healing industrial complex, and I really appreciate your thoughts on that so much. And you touched on many aspects in our conversation already, but I would love to dive a little bit deeper, if you like, about how you see, like, what are your thoughts about access at the moment, and what has helped you, and what would you like to see more of?
Yeah, I mean, this is another huge conversation. I feel like
Sorry.
No, I mean, you know, it's good to have, it's good to start them. Yeah, I think, well, healing industrial complex, I'm pretty sure that's like because I was using it and then I was like, it had to have come from somewhere. And I think it came from Mia Mingus, who does like disability justice work and does work around childhood sexual abuse. And I feel like Mia Mingus had this, I think it was like a larger medical industrial complex chart that then like talked about healing industrial complex. And so to me, that just kind of means like, you know, like we all live in capitalism, whether or not we want to, but like, you know, healing has already been and is continuing to become incredibly professionalized. And, you know, like, I feel like I'm constantly getting ads on Facebook trying to like make me sign up for workshops where I can like learn to make like hundreds of thousands of dollars and, you know, like doing healing work, which like part of me is just like healing work is very, very serious, you know, like you're literally working with people around like the heaviest shit that they're carrying. And so there's something for me that feels really like so gross about, you know, like trying to break into six figures when like the work that I'm doing is like with other people's trauma. And I'm like trying to find the right language for that, but it feels, you know, like it feels so complicated to me. And I think also too, you know, like that is to say, like, I do need to survive and thrive and pay my bills and all of that. So like, it's a juggle for me to kind of continuously try to show up and work in a way that feels aligned with my integrity and also like survive, which I think, you know, is a lot of people's experiences doing healing work. But yeah, I think about access a lot. I think about, you know, like financial access in particular, to talking about the healing industrial complex of just, you know, like what does it mean when our sessions are hundreds of dollars, you know, and like who is actually able to access that, you know? And it's, you know, like I've heard from a lot of people like, oh, well, people can just kind of save up money, or if they're really serious about their healing, then like they'll prioritize this. And I think for me, you know, like I work on a sliding scale, and I'm constantly trying to like expand people's understanding of that. So like people can kind of look at my scale and either like look at their levels of income and find where they could be paying in a way that feels comfortable, or, you know, like just taking a lot of things into consideration, I guess, when they're paying for my services.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think it feels really heartbreaking to me to imagine that somebody, you know, like I've had many clients say like, I've like desperately needed this work and I've never been able to afford it. And so that feels like gutting to me. I just like, I have been, because I've been in the desperation places many, many times. And I've also, you know, like my income has been like kind of like lower in working class for probably the most of the time I've been in New York City. And I've kind of like scraped by and found healing practices with people who were willing to work sliding scale with me, or like donated their time to me, or like I had a dear friend in the fall who was like, you're struggling. Like I had a pretty rough summer, and he was like, you're struggling and you're pretty fucked up. Like let me do a healing, like a sound healing session for you. Yeah. And like, without people doing that, like I would not be here. I would not be doing the work that I'm doing. And I, you know, like I know that not everybody can afford to do that kind of work with people, but I guess for me, it's trying to find like multiple access points. So like, you know, like maybe sessions are a certain amount of money, but then I'm able to do like some free community work here and there, or, you know, like tinctures are like a more affordable way of kind of getting a little bit of support. There's something else I wanted to say and I lost it. Oh, and I think another component of the healing industrial complex is kind of this like this singular notion of healing, where like it becomes very individualized and like really disconnected from like the oppressive and violent structures and institutions that are really creating like illness and violence. And so, you know, like there's a way where it's like I'm very conscious that like somebody coming to work with me for a couple of sessions, like no matter how much work we're able to do with each other in those sessions, like very often they're going to be going back out into the world that like is violent or can't hold them, or, you know, like they're like trauma for many people is not a single experience. It's an ongoing daily experience. So, you know, I think that's hard to sit with sometimes, and it can feel like really defeating sometimes too, I think.
Yeah, totally. I want to circle back to what you said in the beginning about someone saying, oh, maybe, you know, people just need to prioritize it and save up. That really always blows my mind. I mean, yeah, that I think that it really only, even if that's not been your own life experience to really struggle financially, it just takes basic compassion to remember that saving up is a privilege too. Not everyone can do that. And even the skill to manage money with the education system as it is now is not something that necessarily is being given to people freely. You know, I think that like managing my own money, it's really a skill that I needed to learn the hard way in my 20s, and not everyone has that privilege. Oh gosh.
For sure.
I have a lot of
Yeah.
feelings about those Facebook ads as well.
Yeah.
I am of course in that world too, and so I get these ads as well. And I think there's some really key beliefs where capitalism as represented by these ads and I are disagreeing. And one thing really being that my time and energy isn't worth more than anyone else's. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that is kind of like a premise really that these webinars or workshops are built upon. And also the idea that it's okay to accumulate that much wealth. I really would love to
Totally.
I would really love to be more financially stable. And I know I will be, you know, yes, like I really want to believe that. And I think it's also okay to have financial desires, but there's just a certain point beyond which that feels cold and empty to me. And I want to, in my business, really sometimes when I think about the embodiment of my business, it feels like having the hands in the earth and like really being grounded in our desires for growth means having solid values underpinning them. And yeah, so I'm on one hand really shocked by these ads and really kind of just bored of it, and on the other hand also really grateful that we can connect with each other in different spheres, and that I am part of a community of people that are really up for questioning these things in a way that leaves room for mistakes as well, and where we can have dialogue. So thank you so much for adding. That's great.
Yeah, it's also like what you reminded me the thing that I had forgotten a second ago, but like the idea of like, yeah, people saving up or prioritizing their health or wellness. You know, those words are so loaded too. They're like, they should all be in quotes, but, you know, like the way that I see the work that I do is like, I'm one part of like the web of care that people are offering themselves. And so, you know, like coming to me and, you know, if they had to come to me and spend, let's say $300 on a session or something, or $200 on a session, like I would imagine that most of the people I work with, that would be, myself included, that would be a huge stretch. And like, you know, like there's so many ways that we all take care of ourselves, whether it's like, you know, like experiencing like sexual harassment on the street and transphobia on the street or something, like people need to take car services, or like they need to like get themselves really delicious food because that's what their bodies need, or like they need to like go buy a book, or they need to be able to go to dinner with a friend who's like a big support system for them. And it's like all of those things they cost money. And so, you know, like I wouldn't want people, I know that I'm like one part of like somebody's larger like system of care for themselves. So that feels important too, to like, I wouldn't want anybody to be like spending everything they had just to come see me, you know?
Yeah. And I feel like we're so lucky as plant people to be witnessing that generosity is safe in nature, and then to be able to very slowly in our own flawed human ways to kind of mirror that feels really sweet. And I see this with your work and lots of other people's work, and I try to do this too, this idea that it's okay to give away our tools and to share what we know, because some people will be able to still afford our one-on-one work, and that's different and beautiful. Like I still get tarot readings from other people, and I work with herbalists when I can, and I like massage, but at the same time this is like public, this is like common, these are common ideas, and they can circulate really freely, and that feels really good, and I'm so happy about that.
Yeah, I mean, herbs are like, it's folk medicine. It's like community medicine. And, you know, like, I love how you're touching on, like, you know, there are so many people doing this work. There are so many people reimagining, like, what this work can look like under capitalism. There are people, you know, like, it's like the way that I'm working is not new. It's maybe a little less frequent than other ways, but like, there are many, many, many people doing healing work and healing, and really like connecting healing and justice too. So yeah, I feel glad to know that so many people are out there also doing it.
Yeah, me too. And I could really talk for another couple of hours, and I would love to go back. So I feel like we touched on a few things that are so deep and rich, and we could definitely do more episodes about it. But I also want to honor your time and people's attention span, and I know that we already shared so much that people can take away. So I would love to know, kind of, maybe to summarize what you're currently offering and where people can find you if they want to know more.
Yeah, so I'm on, I feel like most of my social media is on Instagram now. So I'm Corpus Ritual on Instagram, and is also where I share a lot of like the work that I'm doing and different ways to do one-on-one work or group work. And so I do one-on-one breathwork sessions in New York City. And I do group sessions also in New York City and sometimes other places. And I'm starting to do some more virtual sessions as well, because I think like currently it seems like a lot of breath work is really located in like cities and in a few cities. So I feel like other people are wanting access to it. So that's exciting. And then I'm doing online writing workshop called Wound Dwelling, Writing the Survivor Bodies, through the Transformative Language Arts Network. And that starts in the end of June, and it's all online, which is really cool because we're writing about trauma. And I think like that can be such a heavy thing to do, but in community, you can do it like online and, behind closed doors, which can be nice. And then I also do, I do sliding scale consultations with herbs, and my tinctures and remedies are on my website and then out in a few spaces, mostly in New York City currently, but my website's ofthebody.net, so people can find me there too.
Great, and I'll put that in the show notes as well, so if people don't have a pen to write down, they can find the link in there.
Cool.
Jennifer, thank you so much. Honestly, I really mean that. It was such a beautiful conversation, and I love what you shared, and I really think there's so much to take away and think about, and super excited to share our conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and talking.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Bye.